I spend most of my time in the Philippines, and I come back here to America when my daughter, who's at the University of Oregon, has a holiday, and we meet here in California.
How long have you lived in the Philippines?
I lived on and off in the Philippines since 1998.
How'd you come about to live in the Philippines?
Well, I had a flying job in Thailand. I flew there for 3 years, and then I had a flying job in Palau, and I flew there 6 years. And the flying job in Palau, our maintenance base was in the Philippines. So every time we had an airplane that needed an engine change, I flew it to the Philippines. And after the airline I flew for in Palau shut down, I ended up in the Philippines, and I just stayed. I get along very well in Asia.
Were you a commercial pilot?
Oh yeah, that's all I've ever done, 50 some years, and never had a different job.
And let's talk a little bit about, this is where you need to come in because I don't know the gentleman's name that he's looking for.
Talk to us about how you started to look for this guy in the Philippines.
In 2006, I was in the States, and I gave a short talk about my experiences as a POW to a group of old flyers called the Red Barons. And this was in Long Beach. And after I gave the talk, an old gentleman came up to me and said, I heard part of your talk, you said you live in the Philippines. He told me that his brother had been in a dogfight in World War II in the Philippines and had never returned, and no trace was ever found of the brother or the plane he was flying. Would I snoop around? And I of course, said, sure I would, thinking to myself, Philippines is a really big place. But it was a nice old gentleman. And so I went back to the Philippines, and I asked a few questions, and it was just the most amazing series of happenings. The first person I talked to sent me to another person who sent me to, I ended up talking to this gentleman in Mariveles, which is at the base of Mount Mariveles where the dogfight occurred, which is on the southern part of the Bataan Peninsula. So this dogfight happened on February the 9th, 1942, 2 months to the day before the Bataan surrender. And General MacArthur, who was on Corregidor, ordered a airplane to fly over some Japanese gun emplacements in Cavite because they were shelling Corregidor every day, and they couldn't see where those guns were because they only fired them in the morning with the sun behind them. So there was 5 flyable American P-40s left, and one Stearman, an old Stearman biplane that was used for camera work. And the pilot of the Stearman was a Filipino hero named Jesus Villamor, who Villamor Air Force Base is named after him, and he's a bona fide Filipino hero. He was going to fly the Stearman to take the photographs. His cameraman was a Filipino guy named Juan Abanes, who learned the photography skills here in America. And the P-40s, to escort him, he was going to take off, and of course this old Stearman only goes 85 miles an hour. It'd be a sitting duck if the Japanese fighters discovered him. So they had 5 P-40s, one of them flown by Lieutenant Earl Stone. And so they escorted him over to the area. He took the pictures, he came back, and he was just about to land at the Bataan airstrip. And unbeknownst to the Americans and Villamor, 6 Japanese Nakajima Nash 97s had been scrambled from Clark Air Base, which the Japanese had taken from the Americans earlier. And so they came roaring down the Bataan Peninsula, and this great dogfight ensued over Mount Mariveles and over the town of Cabcaban. And all the planes made it back, American planes, except Earl Stone. And none of the other guys, they were all busy in a dogfight. They didn't know what happened to Earl Stone. But there was hundreds of eyewitnesses to the dogfight, because the Americans and the Filipino soldiers had retreated down to around Cabcaban and Mariveles because they were within 2 months of surrendering. So there was thousands of people there watching this wild dogfight over their heads. And I found descriptions of the dogfight in seven different books written by people who were there. And in 4 or 5 of the books, they described 2 planes, a Japanese plane and an American plane, in and out of the clouds over the top of Mount Mariveles. And nobody saw exactly what happened, but all of them, all the descriptions say that pretty much the same thing. Both planes went into the clouds and bang, bang, they heard 2 explosions. And one guy said, oh, they must have had a mid-air collision, bang. And another one said, you know, everybody, they knew they'd hit the ground, and nobody knew exactly why. And of course, the war was, the Americans and the Filipinos had been under the pressure from the Japanese for months, and they were starving and out of food and out of ammunition and out of ideas. So nobody had the energy to run up a mountain and see what happened. So nothing happened. There was no search, there was nothing. So until I went over there and started piecing around, asking questions. So I found a guy named Lito Rubia who owns a shipyard in Mariveles, and he told me, he speaks very good English, he says, you know, one of my men told me a story about an airplane wreck up on Mount Mariveles. And I said, really? And he says, I'll get him in. So a couple of weeks later, Jesse, and he's kind of a peasant, he was a herdsman who herded animals up there, and he told the story that 15 years earlier, well, 15 years now, 11 years earlier, in 2007, he had stumbled on, he'd cut his foot on something sharp when he was up on the mountain, and he wasn't looking for airplanes, he was digging up rattan pines for rattan that he would sell to make a little extra money. And he dug through the weeds, and sure enough, it was part of an airplane. And so Lito Rubia and Jesse volunteered to lead a group of Filipinos up the mountain when the weather got good to find this site and take some pictures. And I was thinking, wow, this is too easy. We're going to find this P-40. It was crashed in 1942, and here we are in 2007. So how many years is that? 60-some years.
Seems like you were kind of destined.
I was just saying, it can't be this easy, can it? So anyway, a couple weeks later, Lito put a group of 13 of his men together, and they took off on a hike up the mountain. I must admit that I don't hike up mountains very well. I've had a hip replacement, plus I'm old. And so I stayed down below. And this is a picture of the group of the 13 Filipinos who went up the mountain. This is Jesse, the herdsman who actually found the plane 11 years earlier.
Now, were you on this mission?
I was running the mission from down below. I was, like I said, I don't go up mountains. These are the guys who were on the mission. And so anyway, they went up the mountain, and we had text communication from the hotel. So I'm down below staying at Yorkie's Pub, having a cold beer in an air-conditioned room. And I got a text that night, we found nothing. I said, keep looking. So the next day, no communication. That afternoon, I got a text from Lito, we found it. I said, oh, God, this is too good. So my answer was, take lots of pictures, see you tomorrow. So the next day, they came down the mountain, and they went back down to Lito's office, and Lito went home, cleaned up, said, meet me in my office. He has a great big Mac computer with a beautiful screen, plugged his camera in, and here was a bunch of pictures. And the very first picture that popped on the screen was of a radial engine, a round engine. And I said, oh, jeez. And I knew instantly that wasn't the American P-40, because the P-40 has a V12 Allison engine, and this was a radial engine exactly like in the Nakajima-97. So, and Lito instantly saw in the look on my face, he said, what's wrong? I said, well, that's not a P-40, Lito, that's something else, and maybe it could be the Japanese plane in the dogfight. So to make a long story short, that was mission number 1. We sent up another group of with an Australian pal of mine who later became my partner in this thing, Kevin Hamdorf, and He's a professional photographer, and he took 1 million pictures. So we found information, data plates on the plane to determine, yes, it was in Nakajima-97. More investigation. We went back to books. We found out who the pilot was. We found a Japanese newsman in Japan who started looking for the family of the pilot, whose name was Sergeant Kurosawa. 2 years later, we located a living brother and a living sister. And the third year, the Japanese came to, well, actually, before that, underneath the engine, we found teeth, human teeth. The Japanese government sent a group of people down to the Philippines to take the teeth back to Japan. They compared the DNA of the teeth with the living brother, and they did, DNA, that's it, a 99.999% match between this being Sergeant Kurosawa, because it matched his brother. So we'd found.
So mission accomplished, but for another guy.
Mission accomplished, but exactly opposite what I wanted. I didn't really care about. But as it turned out, I met the family. The Japanese family came down, the daughter of the sister and her daughter. So I had the niece and the great niece there, and they were just couldn't have been nicer. A lot of crying, and they were so happy. They went up the mountain to the Christ site, and they had a big ceremony. They burned incense and all that stuff.
Let's talk about your first.
Talk about then what led to the
Okay.
discovery.
Okay. Now we found on the 6th, 7th, and 8th mission, we found the remains of the Japanese pilot. We identify him in 2009 by DNA with the living brother, but no sign of Earl Stone. So my main searchers who went up the mountain were a group of Aitas. Aitas they're small black people. I guess you call them Negritos, and they're tribesmen who live in the mountains around in the Philippines. So anyway, they were my main men for going up the mountain. Those guys could run up the mountain and down the mountain and without batting an eye. They would go up there barefooted. Nothing. So I had these guys, and I'd send them up there, and I'd give them a specific area to look. And they would go up, and they'd spend 3 or 4 days, and they'd come down, and nothing. So finally, I decided just to use the intuition of the Aitas. I just go up there and look, see what, this is on mission number 13, the 13th group of people I'd sent up the mountain. They went up there, and one of them had a telephone and could text me, couldn't call me, but text me, says, "We found something coming down." So the next day I met him at the drop-off spot where I always drove them as far as I could go up the side of the hill in a 4-wheel drive. And they were there, and they had a bunch of stuff, and the main thing they had was a camshaft. And it was obviously from an engine. And 5 or 6 50 caliber bullets. So we knew it was something American because the Japanese didn't shoot 50 caliber bullets. So these were 50 caliber bullets, and on the back of every 50 caliber bullet is the date, the year. So they're all dated 40 and 41. So we knew they were the right. So they came down. I got millions of pictures of them with all the stuff they'd found. The camshaft, we took pictures of the camshaft, did exact measurements, and we sent the information on the camshaft to a group of a family in Chino, California, who are rebuilding a P-40. These are the experts. Their last name is Nightingale, I believe. And so without hinting what it might be, I said, "What's this?" And the answer came right back in email. That is the camshaft from an Allison, whatever the correct numbers of that engine are. So we knew we had the right engine from a P-40. So then I sent another group up there. The Aitas led up a bunch of guys, my cameraman and a couple of FedEx pilot friends of ours, and they scourged around, and they found all kind of stuff. And one of them, and it's a data plate, it's stainless steel, it's in perfect condition. I got millions of pictures I'll show you, but I gave the data plate to the brother, Wes Stone, who lives here in California. And it said on it, P-40 D/E, right wing machine gun number 3. And then it had the serial part number, so we knew now we got a P-40. And since then we found another data plate for a blast shield. We found one of the main landing gear. We found the motor mount. We found hundreds of fired and unfired 50 caliber shells.
What was your first time you spoke and dealt with JPAC?
JPAC came to the Philippines, nothing to do with us, and they made a presentation at the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, in Angeles City, and their presentation was "No One Left Behind." That was the title, and they had a little movie they showed. It was about JPAC going to battle sites in World War II, Vietnam, and claiming that they recovered, and they did good work. They used to do good work before I don't know what happened to JPAC, because they recovered the remains of my backseater from Vietnam. JPAC went into the crash site, they dug the hole where the plane hit the ground, and my backseater never got out of the plane. They recovered teeth, DNA'd it with
What was his name?
Ray Salzarullo, Lieutenant Ray Salzarullo, killed in September '66. So JPAC's recovered hundreds of people from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, World War II. Something happened to JPAC around the time of our search. The guy who was in charge, they just became more or less a bunch of bureaucrats who were sitting around having cocktails, I think. They seem to have lost either it was poor leadership, I don't know what it was, but JPAC started doing a lot of talking and not doing any action, because they told me at that meeting in the Philippines, if you find the crash site of Lieutenant Stone, we'll send a team right now. You give us proof. Well, we gave them proof in 2009. We found the site. We got the pictures. We got the bullets. We got the data plates from the plane. The Japanese plane hit the side of the mountain, bang, in one spot. So everything was right there. Earl Stone's plane hit at a glancing blow. So there was the main place it hit was here, but stuff scattered. The main landing gear we found 150 yards down the hill. So anywhere in between could be the remains of Lieutenant Stone. JPAC has the capability. When they go to a site, they what do you call it when you grid it? They grid it. They take the whole site and they grid it, and then they search every little square in that grid. They got the resources of the United States government behind them. They spend the average of $1 million per site they investigate. We spent probably $20,000 over 7 years on our whole thing, because I was the one that financed it, and I didn't have $1 million. But JPAC promised they'd come, they didn't. And I've got all the letters, which I've given you. The evidence I sent to JPAC saying, here, we found it, we're waiting for you, and all of their bureaucratic excuses.
So I'm assuming that the first time that you sent them all this information, you were probably excited that they were going to come right away.
I thought they'd be on the next plane.
And when did you realize that you were getting a runaround at JPAC?
When I sent my letter to General Tom, who was the chief military officer, head of JPAC, copies to all of his civilian, I don't know if they're under him or equal to him. Johnny Webb was the top civilian guy there, and the answers I got were like unbelievable.
Tell me some of the answers you got.
The Philippine government will not allow American military personnel to come to the Philippines and search for missing World War II personnel.
Was that a lie?
That's a lie. My answer was, when we found Sergeant Kurosawa's crash site, the Japanese guy involved in the dogfight, sent the information to the Department of Human Welfare in Japan, which is equivalent to JPAC. They barraged me with information and sent a team to the Philippines, head by Mr. Yamamoto, with the assistance of the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs and the Philippine National Museum, all of which were involved in the helping. This Japanese team went up the mountain to the crash site and recovered remnants of the Nakajima-97. So my letter to General Tom was, wait a minute, the Philippine government just invited the Japanese equivalent to JPAC. Here's pictures and here's the letters inviting them with total cooperation by the Philippine government. And now you're telling me that the United States of America, who saved the Philippines from Japan in World War II, can't come here to rescue our soldiers that were defending the Filipinos? I said, what's wrong with this picture? What am I not getting? Anyway, you read the letter. I didn't make it too insulting, but I felt like choking somebody. General Tom's answer to me, well, he says, that's exactly true. The Philippine government won't let us come. And so I started writing a barrage of letters to everybody I knew in the U.S. Embassy, and I finally got some results. And result number one is I have an article here in a newspaper, and it'd be a mess if I can't find it. Can you?
Just tell us about it.
Oh, here it is. After all these years, PH, Philippine U.S. to search for remains of World War II MIAs. So the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs put this in the newspaper, the national, and every newspaper.
You made this happen, though. JPAC didn't make this.
I made this happen. Me and with a lot of help from a couple of colonels in the U.S. Embassy, some really good guys that I met over a beer and stuff, and they wrote letters. And
but the organization that's supposed to do this had nothing to do with this.
they had nothing to do with this. Fact is, they were totally unaware of this. So I took color pictures of this and emailed it to General Tom and Johnny Webb and all the rest of the bureaucrats at JPAC.
What was your response to that?
We're planning a trip to the recovery site of Lieutenant Stone. Right now we're looking for a helicopter. And my answer to that was, look, my 60-year-old partner, Kevin Handor, has been up that mountain 5 times. And we walk up there. It only takes 5 hours. The JPAC is full of young, tough, enlisted guys whose job is to go find things. Surely you can just hike up there. And their answer was, we haven't yet found a helicopter with the insurance can be approved by JPAC. JPAC, 20-some members of JPAC were at a hotel in Subic Bay. Dr. Greg Kupsky was the lead man, and he promised us, I met with all of his men, we're going to get down there and get up there and find the remains, but his bosses obviously said, sorry, we can't go.
As a former officer in the United States Air Force, as a POW MIA for almost 7 years of your life, how does it make you feel that your government?
How does it make you feel?
How does this make you feel?
Very angry, as you can tell from the tone of my voice and the criticism I've already given to JPAC. I mean, it's just a bureaucratic drinking team. They need to be cleaned out. I understand that the new general in charge has been fired, that Johnny Webb has been fired, and a few other people have been fired, but that's just eyewash. What they need is some aggressive young colonel to get in there with the backing of the President of the United States and everybody below him and just say, do it, go, and God, this is the United States of America. We don't need a bunch of, it's just a bureaucratic drinking club. They need to maybe dump JPAC, get a new thing called Recover of Dead Americans, or something, a new name, a new group, because they've got such a blight on their history now.
Why is it important to spend $1 million on a guy who's been dead for 70 years?
You just go meet Earl Stone's brother and his niece, and then you'll find out why.
Tell me why this is important. There's a lot of people that say,
Tell me why.
no, hold on, Matthew. There's a lot of people that say that they should spend money on schools, the people that are living. Why should we spend money on people that have been dead for 70 years?
Well, freedom ain't free. And these guys died protecting the things that the United States was based on, freedom. And you start deserting your soldiers, and then the other soldiers realize that the government doesn't give a damn about them. Nothing could be more important than bringing home to the families their loved ones who died. That's why.
So, what was the entire time span from when you first contacted JPAC, you know, I guess it'd be till today, basically, right?
Well, we met JPAC when they gave their little presentation at the VFW in the Philippines. I believe it was spring of 2007. They said, you find Earl Stone's Christ site, we'll be there. We found Earl Stone's Christ site in January of 2009. I sent them every bit of information, the pictures of the parts we found, the data plate, the GPS coordinates. So 2009 till now, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 5 years. And all we've got is miserable bureaucratic excuses as to.
Was there any physical evidence of Earl?
We ourselves did not find any teeth or bones, but like I said, that the area is pretty big, and how much, you know, I mean, we're just little old me paying for this. So we need a big outfit to grid this thing out and find his remains, get the DNA matched to his living brother, Wes Stone, and bring him home to a.
Is it a safe assumption to say that you're not going to quit? You're going to continue this mission?
We're absolutely not going to quit. The fact is, we sent up another group in February of 2014, led by my partner, Kevin Hamdorf, the Australian photographer, and they just had a hunch about a dead tree. They remembered seeing there. They went up to excavate underneath this dead tree, thinking maybe just per luck that tree had fallen and is someplace we hadn't looked previously. So no, we're still at it.
When JPAC reorganizes to whatever they are you going to contact them again?
God, I plan on it. I hope they contact me, because they've certainly got everything there on file. Not only me, the Wes Stone and his daughter Liz Stone barraged JPAC with, when are you going to do what you promised? Go recover my brother. And so far, nothing. All we hear now is that JPAC is reorganizing. They fired all the big shots, and now I have no idea who's the big shot's going to replace them, but hopefully they're doers and not talkers.
Has this become a personal mission for you? Now, I mean, obviously you were led to this quite serendipitously, but now is this something you want to continue?
It has become really personal, because when we found the Japanese remains and then they were identified by DNA, all I could think of, God, this story has to have a happy ending. We've got to bring Lieutenant Earl Stone home. And yeah, it's very personal.
You're great, Spike. Thank you. I think